This show is sponsored by Den 10 Insurance Services, helping businesses get the right insurance for all their insurance needs. Visit den10.io to get a quote. DENTEN.io. And remember, when you buy an insurance policy from Den 10, you're giving back on a global scale. Hello, all my entrepreneurs and business leaders, and welcome to the Michael Esposito Show, where I interview titans of industry in order to inform, educate, and inspire you to be great. My guest today left a corporate job to start her own practice. She learned to be self-sufficient and find strength in the face of adversity from her ancestors. She is a leader, an educator, a coach, and much, much more. Please welcome the owner and founder of MEM, Nutrition and Wellness, Marie Murphy. Welcome.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
I'm excited to have you on. I have my first opening question. I was just thinking about it as we were preparing to get the show started. How much water is too much water?
Oh my goodness.
I got personal on you. We're certainly going to dig into your backstory, but I was just thinking about that. I was like, I drink a lot of water. I go to the bathroom a lot.
Yeah.
Always, obviously, we know what I'm doing there. So
it's so funny because I don't think I've ever been asked how much water is too water, except for by my kids who always want to know everything. But everyone always wants to know how much water is enough water, right? So you're the first person to really ask me that. But I wouldn't give you a specific amount in terms of how much is too much water, but rather like benchmarks in terms of if you're like over consuming water. Okay. And so, you know, I think that if you have, if you're going to the bathroom, if you're peeing more than, once every 2 hours, it's probably too much water. The other thing is that you want to get your fluid from not just water, but also foods and things like that. So, I would say there's not necessarily an upper limit in terms of how much water you're drinking because everyone's different. Everyone's activity level is different. And you're also perspiring, in different levels and things like that. So, I think it's more a question of, is there something behind you over consuming water in general?
What could be that something behind?
So maybe there's is there like a compulsiveness to you drinking so much water? And if there is just kind of noticing that and checking in with that.
I think for me, I find, believe it or not, I talk a lot. And so my mouth gets dry, my throat and all that. And so drinking water refreshes it all and kind of like relaxes everything and feels good. Yeah,
absolutely. So I guess I would say too, yes, I notice that too when I have days when I talk a lot, I also drink a lot more. If you were drinking more than like twice your body weight in ounces of water, then that might be a little over the top, because what I normally have people do is drink their body weight in ounces of water as a general rule, and then accounting for physical activity and things on top of that.
I'm going to take that into account. Yeah. I made some notes here on my body because I have this like big, that we all have our canteens now that we walk around with that back in the day used to have all sorts of like cool little Arizona prints on them, like some sort of native prints on them. But now we all have these huge water bottles and I have one on my desk and I want to say it's 32 ounces, the big one, right?
Yeah.
Like, they're about 32 ounces. And I probably fill that up probably 3-4 times before 4 o'clock.
Right.
So that's not so bad.
So that's not so bad. No, because if, for instance, you were if you were a 200-pound individual, then you would be doing 200 ounces, which breaks down to
oh man, we're getting into math.
Yeah, I know. Now the math.
All right, we're not going to bore you all, so don't worry about that. Let's get into Marie and what she's doing. I was just really, really interested in that, and I think what's cool about having different guests on and people from different backgrounds is that you help answer some of my questions, which I hope answers some people's questions on the other end. I mean, in fact, we were just talking with Lara, and you were just talking about some other eating and dietary things. So it's really nice to have somebody like you come in who's knowledgeable and who can kind of help us understand what are our bodies doing and why are they reacting to food in certain ways. And I know we're going to get into that a lot.
I will add one more thing about water before we move on, if that's okay. Just because the thing that you need to be concerned about or think about with overconsumption of water is dilution of your electrolytes, right? So that's why it would become an issue. Is like if you were drinking, that's what they talk about after marathons and things like that.
Right.
That people drink all of the water and then it dilutes all your electrolytes.
Right.
So if it's something that you feel like, I drink so much water, you can drink something like smart water or coconut water or something like that to get some electrolytes in there with that water.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, for me, it's just more of like, I just drink a lot of water. I'm just peeing all the time is really what it comes down to here.
Right.
Well, a little TMI here. All right. Back to what we do here on the Michael Esposito Show, which is to learn about you and your story. So thank you for entertaining me and sharing and helping me understand my water consumption. But you shared in your bio to me about your mother, and you say your ancestors. So for me, I feel like when I read that, when I hear the word ancestors, I think a long history of people. And you mentioned bootstrap themselves. So I'm very interested in this background and who these people are and how they inspired you today to do what you're doing.
Yeah. So I think I've really connected with this story over the last couple of years, even more as an adult, I guess, than I have, in the past, which is the story of my mom's ancestors, who are all farmers. They're like a long, long legacy of farmers coming from Germany to this country, and having migrated and been immigrants in different contexts. So they moved from Germany / Austria to what is now the Ukraine, which is kind of crazy, or Ukraine, sorry. And were immigrants there and kind of started from nothing, from absolutely nothing, just whatever they managed to bring with them on these like overland and water, boat journeys. To start farming in a place that wasn't all that hospitable, really, like very quite inhospitable, and did that there for several generations, about 100 years or so, and then moved from there to this country and settled the West, right? So they moved out to homesteads in the West once those were being kind of distributed. And started from nothing there again and farmed for generations there as well. My mom grew up on a farm. I did not. I grew up, in the suburbs, but still have those stories of, what that looked like for people and the hardships, things like that.
In farming there's so many different facets to farming. And so if you could describe what kind of farming they were involved in, I mean, I can make an assumption based off of your background now, but you're saying hundreds of years. So they could have started one way and evolved into a different way. So what kind of farming were they involved in and then soon the farm that your mother grew up on? Yeah,
so interesting because they started, would have been in Ukraine doing more of like grain farming. So probably things like oats and wheat, would be the best, I think, description of that. And then having settled in this country originally would have started also with more I think, farmers had, at that time, they were small family farms, right? So they did not only just those grains that they would sell, but then also raising stuff for their own consumption. So things like chickens and with the eggs and everything like that. And so I think there's an evolution there. And it's interesting because I think that there's some continuity up until my mom's generation where she then had more of, they did dairy farming. So they had dairy cows, but then of course they also had, it was primarily dairy, but they did some other things, and I think had kept chickens and things like that as well. But she would tell stories about her grandparents who had a very, old world, I guess, sort of feel to the farm, where they did live off of much of that. Yeah, much of what they raised there on the farm.
And I'm assuming bartering with other farmers and different people in town or whatever to be able to make do.
Yeah, I think so. The particular community where her grandparents were, that I did visit as a kid as well, their farm, they lived in a community of all the farmers that came from Ukraine, all just came over and settled in Montana. So I think that there was a very interesting and different than what farming is like now, I think, where the families all lived quite close together, and then they had these small farms that they, whereas now I think with these large farms, people are pushed out so far because they have these large industrial kind of farms. Sure. So very different feel.
The community is different. Right. I'm thinking about what you're sharing here, and these farmers and over 100 years, and how they came to this country with almost nothing, right? To what you're saying there. And I think, they were the first entrepreneurs. When you think about the farming industry as a whole, it all started with people who were, to your point, were just trying to live off the land, just trying to survive and create a way where they can feed their family, and then find out that they can actually feed their family and maybe make a profit or earn something or make a trade or something like that. So they were like the first entrepreneurs, and that's in your lineage, entrepreneurship. Did your mother ever speak about her parents and the farm and what business was like?
For sure, a lot. Not overly.
Right,
so yeah, it
but
wasn't.
But
there were the stories there, yeah. And her parents definitely, being on a farm was different than her grandparents being on a farm. And what she grew up in was her parents very much needing to supplement their income a lot. So her parents were also bus drivers, and then they eventually worked as part of an university in the agriculture department. So, having to kind of adapt to the times.
Adapt is such a nice word. Adaptability. My coach and I were just going over that recently, where just looking at different ways of doing things. And I think the word pivot is used a lot, and all these different, I guess, buzzwords. But the word adapt isn't always used that much. And when you think about what adapt means, it doesn't mean giving up what you're passionate about. And whether your grandparents were passionate about farming or not, it was their staple, right? It was what they leaned on. So it doesn't mean giving up that. It just means adapting and understanding that maybe we have to make a little shift here and pick up a shift bus driving. I like that they went into agriculture, and you said, so now they started teaching agriculture at the university, which is a tie with you because you've done some teaching with nutrition, right, at the university level. Yeah,
there's definitely also an educator history in my family as well. So yeah, in some ways it brings those things together.
Tell us about the educator history, because I'm thinking like, when I see the old videos or stories or books or history books of whatever of like what a classroom looked like back then, typically it was on a farm, right? Or it was in a farm community of some sort where you had this like house or this whatever. And it was like this person, the mother or usually a woman, teaching the kids that lived in that community. I think, my mom went to, I think there were like... And I'm not talking about your mom. I'm sorry, because I know your mom is not that old. I'm talking about your ancestors, if that was part of it. But I guess maybe not. Maybe it wasn't your mom's. I'm sorry.
Oh, so when they educated historically,
right.
So there were educators back in that time when my mom has a an aunt who, like wrote out her journal as a teacher, kind of having, and as you said, women at that time, that was if they were going to have a job,
right,
it was going to be most likely teaching or something like that. One of the aunts along the way did that, became a teacher, and had, then you leave home and you are sort of put up in the town that you've moved to be the teacher in that town, right? There is that more historical educator in that kind of small setting as well.
My mother and my wife are both teachers. My mother has since retired, but that's why I was kind of interested in that kind of aspect of things. You also spoke about your mother, and she mentioned about her parents teaching all of her siblings to learn different instruments, and then they came together and played as a band. I think that story speaks to so many different things, and I think collaboration is one of the things. I'm interested in that story, how that came up, and why that was pertinent to you to share with me.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, the difference between farming several generations back and then in my mom's generation is when it started to push out to be the further away from other families. And I think they felt quite isolated to some extent where they were on this, larger farm. And that was part of, music is also part of our family history. And so my grandfather and grandmother were like, let's have them each choose a different instrument and then we can play together as a family. And I think that doing that, just indicates their adaptability, sort of like in kind of a remote area, we can still make music together. So I think it's just kind of this sort of adaptability and ability to make the best of the situation that you're in, and bring in, music is, I think, a great way to sort of to be together, to lift spirits and that kind of thing. So, yeah.
Do you see a correlation between the business world and the business community that you're in today and that whole band story? Do you tie the two at all?
Do you mean like the larger entrepreneurial world, or do you mean within nutrition specifically?
The entrepreneurial world, okay. Yeah. I mean, maybe it's in nutrition. It's really however it lands with you.
I think that I guess for me, with the way that I run my business is sort of choosing to do the things that I feel are most impactful and make the most difference for clients, and in what I want to see for clients, if that makes sense. So I'm able to kind of choose things that I want to do rather than like, in a corporate sort of setting where you have a defined job role, and you're expected to do certain things, and you have to kind of stay within that role. Within my space, I'm able to kind of choose what I want to focus on and bring that to the forefront, if that makes any sense.
It certainly does. It speaks to, and we're going to get into your creativity and part of why you chose nutrition. But what I was saying, I didn't, for me, the way that I interpret that story, when I hear that story about your grandparents choosing different and having the children choose different instruments to be able to play, and the way that you said coming together as a band, I think on one end it's a beautiful story, right? Just about your mother and her history. But then when I look at it in terms of the entrepreneurial world and journey, it's to me it speaks to like the chambers that we're a part of, the business associations that we're a part of, that when we all collaborate and work together, we all kind of uplift our business community. So you think about the different towns that we live in, and you're in Poughkeepsie, and so we think about the Dutchess County Chamber, which we as a company just joined, and Ulster County Chamber, and all the different chambers, or business associations. When you're working with the different businesses in these chambers and these organizations, and you start networking with each other or start speaking with each other about like, what's a good client for you? And how can I find a good client for you? Or who's a good referral source for you? And you start building that relationship together. It's kind of like bringing a band together, because together you're now making music. You're like, hey, I met this person and I think that they'd be a good fit for your business. Or we're also helping that individual. I think part of why this is like right in the forefront for me is because by just joining the chamber, so we're Denton's an insurance company. So as an insurance company, by joining the chamber, for us, it's about the client experience when working with our clients, right? So for me, when I'm going to these events, I'm looking for people that are going to provide a great client experience to my clients. So that comes about with different, we'll use the example of a homeowner, right? Or a home buyer. The real estate bringing the real estate broker, bringing the mortgage broker, bringing the estate attorney, and bringing the insurance broker together by creating that team and knowing that we can trust each other like a band, that we can trust each other. We all know that we can share in the responsibility of bringing that client through a fantastic experience because we all trust each other. And so when that client meets one of us, they know that they have an entire team behind them to help them.
Yeah.
And so to me, when you were just saying that with the band, that's what landed with me. I was just like, it's like creating these little teams. And I think you probably have that in the health and wellness community as well, of these different dietitians and nutritionists. And you mentioned you do yoga and all of this like health and wellness field of working together and bringing a client together of like, hey, I have this person in my yoga class who, has some dietary needs. I'd like to introduce her to you, Marie. So that's how I see it all working together as a band.
Yeah, absolutely. And that just brings to mind working with a client and then there being a treatment team, kind of,
yes.
and informally, because it's different when I'm working in a private practice, but having their doctors and having their therapists and having their other personal trainer, whatever it is, kind of on board and bringing that all together.
Yeah, because then you're working in harmony for this client, because like. I think that as a client, because I'm a client too, to many different things, right? In terms of like marketing and all these different things. But so what we want is to make sure that when we're purchasing all these different people or things or services or whatever they are that we're purchasing, is that they're all going to work together to make it better. And like to your point with this client, with this patient, is that they have a doctor, they have a therapist. They want to make sure that they can trust somebody that trusts all these people to bring it all together to make sure that they're healthy. So that's what I think about when I hear the band story. Like I said, I think it's a beautiful story, but I also relating it to the entrepreneurial experience or to the business experience in that all of us working together create this beautiful music. Yeah. Speaking of music and creativity, you said you were brought to the nutritional world because of your creativity and it kind of brought out that creativity for you. I'm interested in finding that passion. I think so many business owners or leaders in business, and that's speaking to the people following the corporate journey and entrepreneurs, we're all looking for that thing that we're passionate about. And we get hung up on certain things, and we like creativity for one, right? We're like, well, how do I use my creativity and make money on it or, have a career in there? How were you able to learn that you're a creative being and find this route where nutrition was able to come into play and be able to be a career choice for you?
Yeah. I'm both, a creative and also a very analytical person as well. So, I've kind of been in both of those realms. And nutrition is something that brings those together for sure. So, as a nutrition, student and professional, we, do everything from organic chemistry to, microbiology and all of that stuff. So there's a lot of the analytic side that goes along with it, which I really enjoy. And the creativity comes into play with all the food, which is fantastic. And it was super exciting. So I get to help people get really creative about what they're eating. And that can be really fun because I have patients who have a lot of dietary restrictions, and we always work toward reducing that. But, for some folks, that's the reality. And so helping them understand that the world of food is wide and diverse, and that they can find different things in there that are going to be satisfying and enjoyable for them is, where I bring the creativity aspect into it. So I think that, while studying nutrition, that really kind of played to my analytic side. Getting into the entrepreneurial space just allows you to be creative, because it's your business. You can, that's the beauty of it, right? You can do what you want with it. So I get to be creative in terms of just what I put out there and all of that. So, yeah.
Did you always know, because we're going to, I think this is a good time maybe then to speak about your corporate experience. But even during that experience, did you always know that you wanted your own business, that you wanted to follow this path?
Such a good question. I think that maybe like many other folks in the entrepreneurial space, I needed to be kind of pushed into it a little bit because it felt it felt kind of risky, right? So I think that part of me always knew that I wanted it, but didn't quite always feel like I could dream big enough to do it. So I think, so I guess I always did know, but I was never certain about how it would come to be. Yeah.
Did your ancestors, did your mother, grandparents have any, do you think that they played any role in your maybe desire or fear of it? Did they play any role in your thoughts on entrepreneurship?
I think just having the history there kind of gave me some confidence of, you can do this. You don't have to go down a certain specific road. I think it just gives you freedom.
Yeah. So even seeing your grandparent, or not seeing it firsthand, but learning about the challenges that your grandparents went through in having the farm and having to adapt and pick up different side hustles that we would call today, even learning about all of that, you felt that was freedom, and you felt that was...
Well, yeah, I mean, they ended up fine.
They ended up fine, yeah.
Right? So yeah, they had challenges along the way, of course, but those always make us stronger, right? So I think that seeing that did give freedom, because there was, and for me, fortunately, there were no bad outcomes. Like nobody, ended up destitute or anything like that. So everyone ended up doing well, and the hardships kind of came along with the territory and made people who they are, really.
I think that is, that what you just said there about they ended up okay, right? And that's why I asked you, is because I think when we're thinking about the entrepreneurial journey, like you said, or taking the risk, is that it's risky. It's scary. But I think that if it's something that is always something that you want to do, right? You said you were pushed, and everybody needs a little pushing. We all want to, take that jump, but we need a little bit of guidance and a little bit of pushing and a little bit of structure if it's what we want. Because the people that don't want it, they don't get that push. The people that don't want it, they get the push to climb the corporate ladder, or they get the push to go a different direction. But we get the push to go in that entrepreneurial direction. And that's why I kind of wanted to draw that out of you about your grandparents, is that when you have that in you, it's kind of like we're always going to find a way, that we're going to adapt. We're going to find a different way. If the dairy farm is not doing what we need right now to succeed or to be successful, then we're going to adapt and we're going to find a different way. And like you said, in the end, they're all right. And they always would have been all right, because they were always going to find a new way to adapt, whatever the circumstance was. I think that's what's cool about the path that we've chosen. It's a scary path, but I think that's really cool. The other thing that you said that I'm interested in learning a little bit more about is you weren't sure if you could dream big enough. And I think that sometimes that's a myth for us entrepreneurs, and that we have to have this this amazing idea that nobody thought about, and that we came up with it, and that's why I'm going to quit my corporate job and start this business. What's the truth to that?
Yeah, no, you don't need. It is a total myth. and I'm not sure where it comes from exactly. But for sure, I think it is sort of this, well, you have to have, this huge dream and you have to give up all this other stuff and you have to, be devoted only to that. And it certainly is a myth. And you can just, start small. You can start small and you can build over time. And
I think where it comes from is we see a lot of successful entrepreneurs who have not invented anything, maybe reinvented, but have really focused on one problem in something and we're able to expand on it. And so let's just use, we can use Jeff Bezos as a very simple example because there you go. Everybody knows Amazon. There was online selling happening when Amazon was coming up. There was, and there still is. There still is. It's just that Jeff Bezos was able to figure out how to build up software that could make the buying process really easy through his website. I mean, there's a lot more that comes into that, and I'm certainly ignorant to all of the different pieces to what makes Amazon what it is. But when you go to Amazon's website, which all of us have been to. I could, if I meet somebody that hasn't been to it, I'm going to have to shake their hand. But when you go to the website, it's really easy to find what you're looking for. And more than likely, whatever you're looking for is there. And so why am I going to waste this is how I feel. Why am I going to waste the time to go to other sites if I know I can find it there? There's other issues involved in that. We're not going to speak about that. We're just talking about it just makes him look like he invented the internet to us, right? He invented online selling, online shopping, or he didn't. He just made it easier for us. That's all he did. Elon Musk and electric cars, they were around before. He just made it easier for us to access them and buy them. That's all he did, and made them cool. Yeah. So I think that's where some of it comes from, is that on the surface, it looks like they invented something. But when you start really looking into what they invented or what was perceived invention, it was already there. They just made it better. Right. And the quote, I'm going to butcher this quote, and it's not even a quote. It's just something that was told to me, is that there's something like only like a finite number of inventions, and everything else is just a reiteration of it. And so we think something was invented, but it really wasn't. Like the phone was around before the cell phone was around, so it wasn't really invented. Anyway, I'm getting off too much on a tangent here. I want to get back to your corporate world and what that was like for you. So let's just take a step further back. So let's just go to your education here. So did you graduate college and you studied different types of sciences, I'm assuming? Well, my undergrad originally was in English literature. And then I went back after that. I also have a degree in philosophy. I've gone to school too much is the moral of the story. How many years in school did you spend? Oh, too many. But then I went and did a master's in nutrition, and that's when I did all of the crazy science stuff and enjoyed it, actually. And when you did the master's in nutrition, that's when you knew you were going to go that route, I'm assuming. Yeah, so I basically decided that I wanted to become a dietitian. And in order to do that, I didn't have a degree in nutrition. And so I did some prerequisite work and then went straight into the master's degree in nutrition. And then after you're done with the coursework, you do an internship. So I did an internship for a year. And then basically went to work after that. So is it that when you graduated and you got your master's that you thought that was the only route, was to get a corporate role? It fell into my lap a little bit at the beginning because I did an internship partly over at Vassar College, just part of it. And after I was finished my internship, they offered me a job there in the food service with their dining. And so I took that. And so it was more just sort of that it kind of, yeah. I mean, that's how I ended up in my sales career. Was I graduated college, I got a job I got a call from Yellow Book, and I took the job. I had a salary, benefits, got my parents off my back. Yeah. And I was like, all right, I'm in, let's do it. Yeah. So speak to us about that corporate experience that you had, because you spent some time there, and Vassar College good place to work too. What was that experience like for you?
Yeah, it was great. I mean, I will say that I also knew that I wanted experience, whether it be corporate or healthcare, before going into anything on my own, which I think is wise in general, and that's what seemed to me to be prudent. And I'm really glad that I did. I got a lot of experience, and I think that it has all pretty much served me in what I do now. And so yeah, I've worked on college campuses for a total of 4 years, I think, altogether. I was also at SUNY New Paltz and Marist College for a while too. So all of the colleges in the region, it feels like. And then I did some clinical, like specifically clinical work, and that's super helpful too. There's just a lot that you need to learn about. And for what I do, talking to people and building relationships clinically and professionally, I just feel like there's a lot that you need to learn, and it's best to kind of do that, I guess, in a kind of more traditional role, not necessarily like on your own.
What was one of the things that you feel that you learned that was exceptional from that experience?
It feels like just a lot of kind of experience coming together. But for me, I guess that I would say talking to people but more importantly, listening to people is...
people who are like experts in the field? Or?
No, sorry, clients.
Oh, clients.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. And being an active listener. That was kind of one of the things that I worked on that I think I benefit most from now in what I do.
And what you do, yeah. I think active listening is something that everybody can benefit from. It's incredible. I was just at a networking event recently. It's incredible on how you're having a conversation with somebody and they interrupt and they keep interrupting, and you're like, are you actually listening to me? Did you ask me a question to hear my answer, or just so that you can speak? And I don't think that they do it intentionally. I've learned that over years, is that like, I don't think it's an intentional thing. I think it's that people aren't, I don't know if you can teach active listening, maybe you can, but I think it's that they're not taught on how to listen actively, on how to ask a question, listen to the answer, and either expand on it or maybe shift directions, but at least to allow that space and that time for it to happen. Active listening, I think, is the key to unlocks the doors to so many things. So you mentioned that the hardest experience that you went through was leaving that corporate job and starting your own practice. What was in day one of like leaving it, not afterwards of sitting in your office, but when that feeling of like you still have the job and you know you're going to be quitting. Walk us through that experience. I imagine that there are, a lot of people can relate to that kind of feeling where you, it's so uncertain, so much uncertainty. And I think that a lot of our identity, comes from what we do, and our, what we do day to day, whether it's family or work or whatever. And walking away from part of your identity feels really unnerving, I think. And so, knowing that you will have resolution, but it's not there yet, right? It's not like you have success. It's not like you have, X, Y, and Z. There's just, I think, a lot of uncertainty. And that just feels uncomfortable, to be honest. So yeah, I just called my sister, and that's what I did. Talked to my sister, made me feel better. So I think, what was that conversation with her?
Oh, it wasn't even very lengthy, I don't think. And it's not about the content, I don't think, a lot. It's just about the presence and the support. Yeah.
Which is what we need is anything that we do in life knowing that we're supported, knowing that the people that love us and care about us support what we're trying to do. And it's not just entrepreneurs. It's like we talk about, people climbing the corporate ladder or working in a corporate world too. They need that support too. We all need that like phone call. There's so many times that different biographies that I've read where it's the phone call to their mother, the phone call to their parent, to their sibling, to a cousin or somebody in their circle of trust, of love, of family, of who they call family. And it's just like you just said, it's not about that they gave me this great advice or whatever it was. It was just knowing that, hey, it's going to be okay. And I think that's so important for all of us to understand is that like at the end of the day, as long as we're surrounded by the people that care about us and that we care about and that we love, we'll use the word adapt. We'll always be able to adapt to the circumstance. I would imagine that when deciding to leave a corporate role that has a nice salary of any salary is nice, right? when entering the world, right? I would assume that there was also a bit of optimism. And I'm interested in what that optimism was for you.
I guess that the optimism lay in kind of what I anticipated, which was having more flexibility, being able to spend more time with my kids, being able to focus on what I was passionate about and wanted to focus on. And I guess having the confidence also coming from several, years of experience and, that I knew what I was doing and felt like I had what it took to offer what I wanted to offer to people through my private practice, and feeling like I could do that. And I wanted to do that. And that I hadn't, my corporate jobs were great and that was great, but I didn't feel like I was able to offer people what I wanted to. So just the ability to be able to do that I knew I was going to be able to do that, and that I would be able to evolve as I wanted to evolve in my business as well.
What is it that you did want to offer? And I'll kind of back that question up with, did you finally start to feel like you were dreaming big and start fulfilling a dream of some sort when you started offering that?
Yeah. Yes. So what I wanted to offer people in my private practice and what I hope I offer people now is the ability to take control of their health in a meaningful way. And so my ability to counsel patients in the corporate or healthcare setting was obviously limited. There's just limitations on that in terms of the amount of time, follow-up, things like that. So within my private practice, I'm able to help people, I think, at a more meaningful level where we don't have all of the boundaries in terms of time and interventions and things like that. And so, yes, to speak to your point, also, once I was, I think, able to start doing that for folks in the private practice, it did feel like a realization in a certain way, where it's like, okay, I can help people. So, yeah.
I like that. I feel like you've said it several times about helping people. I wonder, I don't think any of us have, I don't know if any of us have the answer to this. Maybe if you do, I'd love the answer to this. I just wonder if you and I, right? Because I had to go through the same thing, quit a corporate job to start my business, right? And I relate to a lot of the things that you said, which is about like me being able to be creative with what I want to do, me feeling like I can help people, me feeling the idea of flexibility of being able to spend time with family and friends or whatever it is. And when we speak about that flexibility, it's for us as business owners, we know we're going to be responsible. So we know that if we need to cut out at 2:00 or we want to cut out at 2:00 to go play with our kids, we also know that whatever work we had planned for the day will get done. We don't need a manager or a boss to say, well, you got to wait till 5:00 to go play with your kids. No, I can go do that at 6 o'clock when they're in bed or doing something else that they don't need me for. But the sun's out and it's beautiful and I want to take them to the park at 2 o'clock, I can. What I'm getting at is I just wonder, and I like I said, I don't have the answer to this, is if in the corporate setting or working for a boss of some sort, if those needs were met for us, for people like us, where we did enter into a job that offered us some sort of security of a salary, of benefits and all this other stuff, and we were allowed to be creative and we were allowed to really follow our true north, which is to help others, and we were allowed and trusted with that flexibility, would we have stayed?
Yeah, I don't think I have the answer to that either. I think there's a real question about human nature that's like buried in there that is difficult to answer.
I think it's very difficult, right?
Yeah. And so, yeah, I think it speaks to a lot of different questions about, our motivations, everyone's motivations and our priorities and our relationships with other people. And, there's just a lot buried in there. And so I don't know the answer to that question. But I know that for me, it was the right decision. I'm sure for you, it's the right decision. It just makes sense. And I'm sure that somehow we can see maybe the answer to that question, which is like, no, this is what, we needed to have that freedom, but it's hard to say.
It is very hard to say. While you were speaking, it kind of made me think a little bit about a speech that I had done, which had to do with the experience that we go through, and that's part of why we do it too. It's that maybe all those needs are met at that corporate position or whatever, but we also enjoy the experience of what we're doing and building and creating.
Sure.
And what we're doing here. So I guess maybe we would have left anyway.
Right. Yeah, I guess maybe that's the answer.
I wonder, Merritt, if you're out there, tell me what to do here. No, I'm just kidding. That's my coach. The other piece that I'm interested in while you were making this decision to leave the corporate job is, did you have any guardrails set up? Did you have a plan? Did you have a business plan? Was there anything really drawn up that was, you knew that, okay, when I leave, day one looks like this? Did you have any of that drawn up? You're analytical, so I feel like I know that you did. Or you're going to stump me here.
Yeah. I had little. So basically a business plan. Mm-hmm. like a bare bones business plan in place.
What did that look like?
So it just, would summarize my where I'm getting revenue from, or where I'm planning to get revenue from, and what my goals in terms of revenue were or are, I guess, depending on, and how and then what my expenses were and are in terms of the business, and how that all plays out, and then what I plan to build in terms of revenue streams. That's the word I'm looking for. And yeah, so it was pretty bare bones, but and my platform's in place. So my business is virtual, so I had various platforms in place that I utilized, and liability insurance, which is important for a private practitioner. So yeah, I mean, it was basically bare bones, but for a solopreneur, it seemed sufficient to me.
I'd like to go back to the business plan, because that's a question that I get often about business plans. I think there's a lot of overwhelm that people feel when constructing one. So go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say, I just used the Small Business Association, and that they made it super easy for me. And so they gave me a skeleton or a basic outline, which I then fill out, and I got
like a Word
registered
doc.
as that was an Excel doc.
Excel doc.
Yep.
Yeah.
And registered as an LLC down the road. That was a little bit later, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so just to speak on that a little bit. So the SBA, first of all, there's SBAs all over the country, SBA offices, that is, all over the country. Mm-hmm. So wherever you are listening to this, you can certainly locate one within driving distance from wherever you are, or some sort of public transportation to get there. And the offices are set up in order to help people like ourselves sometimes find a path. I remember going there before I even knew what I wanted to do and meeting with somebody. And she asked me a lot of good questions that made me think, where I had to be like introspective about what is it that I want to create? What is it that I want to do? And then to your point, going back, and they can help guide you along the way of putting together a business plan and everything. And so I do want to speak to that overwhelm in that, right? It doesn't have to be this huge 50-page document that you're going to submit to a bank. Now, look, if you're going to submit it to a bank, might need to be certain things. I know that. But just to start, right, you just had some things of your platform, of needing insurance. What are your basic needs? Interested in the virtual. So when did you start this practice?
I started it during the pandemic.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that, I'm assuming, was part of
That was why. And that, that was part of the push that we didn't talk about before, was that when I previously thought about starting a private practice, it did feel really overwhelming. And how would I possibly do that? And the reason for that is that, to think about getting an office and figuring out where to be, et cetera, and then only having access to the client base in that region that's going to be able to drive to your office felt very overwhelming and unsustainable in a way. And so, but also doing a virtual practice before the pandemic didn't seem like anything that made sense too, right? So, but then once the pandemic happened, that was everything. Everything was virtual, and so that was the drive, the push, and it was said, okay, well, I can do this virtually. This makes sense. It's something that people need, and if I am a virtual practice, it's sustainable, and it makes sense to me.
I think the pandemic, obviously, I think we could put, it was terrible. It's terrible that so many businesses experienced loss during that time, families and lost loved ones during that time, and still do today. But just speaking to the pandemic, that is, the restrictions that were put into place, all of it was uncomfortable and not something that any of us want to experience again. Right. That being said, we can also look at what came out of it that was positive. For me, the acceptance of me using hand sanitizer all the time. A little levity here. But you're right in that before the pandemic, people were not open to meeting via Zoom, via virtual, any type of platform that you're using. It was like, hey, look, if you can't come meet me in person, then forget it, deal's off. Now, business was being conducted for years before the pandemic, virtually at times, because companies in across the oceans were working with each other. And how do you think they met? They met in a boardroom virtually all the time. But on a smaller level, when we're thinking about our small communities like Dutchess County or Ulster County or whatever, we're like, hey, look, I'm 20 minutes away from you. Let's go meet at the coffee shop. But what the pandemic offered us, and also when we think about age too, of people who are older, just not comfortable with wanting to turn on a camera or comfortable with get in the car and come meet me, and they ended up having to become comfortable with that and having to adapt and learn how to use this technology, because if they didn't use the technology, then they didn't get to see what's most important to them, their loved ones. My children got to FaceTime with their grandparents, and so many different things came out of it to where we were able to do it. But when we think about the business world, that's what opened up for us, was this virtual world opened up to everyone, to where, yeah, maybe you're only 20 minutes away, but we can meet virtually. You can be comfortable in your home. I can be comfortable in my home office, that is, and I can actually book another appointment 5 minutes after you. And you could book another appointment 5 minutes after me, because we don't have to drive to each other and we don't have to do that commute. Now, of course, nothing beats an in-person. I like to do this podcast in person. I think that there's a lot of nuances to meeting in person. But it's really nice that we have that option now. We actually opened our agency virtually and our insurance agency virtually. We wouldn't have been able to do that before the pandemic. When I first looked into opening up an insurance agency prior to the pandemic, I had to have a brick and mortar. Insurance carriers wouldn't allow me to sell insurance without having a brick and mortar location. When the pandemic happened and I said I want to open up, they said, sure, yeah, open up virtually. So we're a virtual office. So I love that we were able, you and I and so many others were able to find something out of it. And that's going to morph too as well. But I think really smart move. The other question I have is, you mentioned other things in starting the business, but then you left out one thing that I'm interested in and how you get business is marketing. You didn't have a marketing plan?
Oh, a marketing plan? Oh, not really. So with nutrition, what I started out doing was working with insurance. I don't work with insurance anymore. That's a whole other conversation. This
is health insurance she's talking about.
Health insurance.
We don't do that one. We stay out of that field for sure.
And that brought me the original clients because they would list me on their sites and things like that. Now I have moved away from that model. And what I do for marketing is basically content marketing. And so, I've done like some different programs, coaching programs and things like that, that help you with that. But basically I just use email marketing and I use social media marketing, and that's pretty much it, and referrals.
Share a little bit about content marketing in your experience, what it means to you, let's say.
Yeah, I think I started out feeling intimidated and like it was a bit of a drag, to be honest. But now I've gotten a little bit more comfortable with it, and it's still not my forte, I guess, but I've kind of become more comfortable in the sense of just putting my message out there, and it doesn't have to and just speaking to your audience, right? And my audience. So, once I have then a base of clients, I can figure out what people are needing, what their questions they're asking, what's on their mind. But once I have that client base, at the beginning, it felt a little more nebulous because I didn't really have a client base to start with. So it's like, what questions are people asking? So it takes a little while to sort of get used to who your clients are and what questions they're asking, what hurdles they have and obstacles they're facing. But then once you have that in place, you're just constantly speaking to that.
Yeah, I've learned about content marketing and use it as well. And I think what I've learned about it and it's always changing, right? There's always a new evolution to it and everything. But I think the original content marketing would be what we tend to see in the old school way, which is like, tell you all about what I do, right?
Yeah.
Right? It's like that's my content, right? Where you ask a traditional my content is, here's all of my services, here's everything about me, here's everything I do. And maybe that worked back then, but today that's no longer the case. That doesn't come across well. And what we see is people like yourself, where we're trying to educate, trying to share information and not withholding it. Not saying, hey, you have to pay me to learn about this. No, here's some information for you. Yeah. And I think that's what you're speaking to, as well as what you put out there on social media, is answering their questions without a consultation, without being a client. Yeah. And I think that when we're speaking to my audience right now, and when you're thinking about your marketing, it's that you're not losing somebody by giving away your ideas and giving away your service. You're actually gaining somebody because you're positioning yourself as an expert. You're being somebody who could actually answer their questions. And so when they're making a decision between the person who's just saying, here's all of my services, and the person that's actually answered their questions, the answer is clear as to who you're going to pick when you finally need somebody to sit in their office, right? Or sit at home and do it virtually.
Yeah. And so I also do a blog, which I think is where I answer a lot of these questions quite more at length. And that's helpful. I use that for email marketing. And that way I'm also in that blog, I do a lot of what the work that I do with clients on one-on-one, where I share, how to do this and how to do that, and different approaches, and then share that with my audience. And I also use it for my current clients, where I say,
Sure.
This is where go read this article, So that's been part of the model along the way as well.
And I think in terms of that marketing, about just giving out so much information, so much free information, so much of ourselves, the fear that others have that don't really buy into this kind of marketing is that they're going to lose that client base and everything. But I know that it's worked for me in this way of like, for me, when I had that moment where I had to find myself of like, the way that I'm going is not working. I'm frustrated. I'm upset. I'm depressed. Nothing's working for me. I need to find a new way. Well, I found Tony Robbins online, right? Mm-hmm. I found his free content, the free webinars or services that he did and everything, which of course he's trying to sell his products and everything. We get it, right?
Yeah.
But I learned so much from it. And then from there, then I found somebody else who offered a free course, and somebody else who offered a free podcast, and somebody else who offered a free, and eventually did go back to Tony Robbins. And I didn't have the money at the time to buy his coaching, which at the time, if I had it, I was going to buy it. But I ended up buying all the CDs for his coaching. And I remember I was in a hotel, and I would go to this hotel I was unemployed. I'd gotten fired from my last time, and I was making believe I was going to work because I didn't want anybody to know. And I was going to this hotel, and I was putting in my Tony Robbins CD, and I sat with a notebook, and I wrote, and I just wrote, and I wrote, and I wrote. But it came from that free marketing that he did early on, which I deviated from because I found all these other people. But I came back to him. Whether you like or dislike, whatever your feelings are on him, the point is that he put out free content that resonated with me, helped me through my experience. And when I knew that I needed more, because it's not cookie cutter to your point of like with a patient, is that when I knew I needed more, I then bought the CDs that made sense for me. And yes, they were actually CDs that I bought, that I downloaded and turned them into digital files so I can actually listen to them because I did not have a CD player. I was like, how am I going to make this work? But we adapt and we figure it out. As we start to wrap up a little bit, I just want to speak about the 3 things that you said you learned from this experience of starting your own business, and they are resilience, patience, and perseverance. Do one of those stand out for you that you think about and you'd like to expand on a little bit today?
Yeah, I mean, they all speak to the experience that I've had. I think I'm not sure. I think
you can speak about all 3 of them.
They actually all
I'll just try to make it easy for you.
No, they all kind of play together. I think that, and I.
They're your band.
They come together to make the music.
Well, what do they mean to you then?
Yeah, no, I think all of those are important. Patience has been important. So this, over the last year, especially, as you sort of feel like things are growing, and there's sort of a growth curve, and you just want it to be a little steeper so that, but just having the patience of knowing that, you need to kind of stay the course and persevere, through obstacles and things that feel difficult and sticky. And so I guess they all speak to the experience that I've had. And, you were talking about marketing and kind of identifying with your audience, education and all of that. And those things take time. And so just being patient and doing what you're doing, and, you are reaching people, you are putting it out there, and sort of, you can feel, especially working from home in this virtual, it can feel kind of isolating sometimes. And so just having that perspective, I think, is important. So I think, all of those things work together, and it has been all of those things for the entrepreneurial experience. And I definitely have leaned so much on family support, friend support, and all of that. the journey.
And I think it's what you were saying there to kind of encapsulate it all is it's belief in yourself, right? It's belief in what you're doing. And, you mentioned it before about having focus and passion. And as long as you have that focus and passion and belief in yourself, it's all gonna work out, which is really cool. You also do good for others and have done some philanthropic work. Do you have any to share with us of some of the work that you've done and how that's helped our communities?
Yeah, a couple of things that are important to me. I've been part of the Poughkeepsie Farm Project for like 12 years now, and their mission has always been kind of close to my heart. And there's been, with the pandemic, we haven't been able to be work on the farm, but that has been historically really important for me, doing actual farming.
I was just thinking about that. Yeah, I was going to say that.
Yeah, so kind of feeling like I'm, getting back to my roots kind of thing, with actually working on the farm, just on a volunteer basis as part of a share kind of thing.
Hard to do that virtually though, right?
Yeah, definitely. But then, they have a presence in the community as well, which I support, being in the City of Poughkeepsie schools, doing kind of farm to school initiatives, school garden initiatives as well. So that, and then I've also, I have kids in the school district here locally, so just helping promote health and wellness in the schools as well. So yeah, those are the kind of programs and initiatives that are close to my heart locally. I've also been supporting the new, there's a daycare opening downtown that's going to be for low-income families, which I am very supportive of, because I think it's so important for families to have access to affordable, high-quality care, to make, especially to make opportunities accessible for women professionally. That's important to me too. That's opening up pretty soon now. But yeah, so I like to try to give back as much as I can to the community.
Cool. I love that. And I love too that what you spoke about there too. I think that so many of us think that we have to give back financially, and that's the only way to give back. And nowhere in there, not that you don't contribute financially, I'm sure you do, but nowhere in there did you mention financial. It's a farm. It's tilling the land, right? Like your ancestors did. It's educating. It's sharing that message with others. And I guess I assume on the daycare one, that's a financial commitment. But there's more than one way to give back to our communities. A good book that I just recently read is The Go-Giver. My cousin who actually came in, Monica, came in and she gave me the book and gave several of our guests the book. And I finally read the book, and it really speaks about that there's obviously the financial element that we can give back, but we can give back in so many ways. And it comes back to us, right? Like it comes back to us. You find it in so many odd ways where somebody says, you find them years later and and you touch their heart in some way or another. So I always like to share that, we give as much as we can. So I love that you do that as well, and that you brought your roots back.
Yeah, that feels, that has a real rewarding aspect to it for sure.
So as we conclude, let's talk about your mantra. So I'm going to read it off here and how it resonates with you. If one advances confidently in the direction of her dreams and endeavors to live the life which she has imagined, she will meet with a success unexpected in common hours. Thoreau.
Yeah, it's just about dreaming, right? Like it's about having the vision, I think, just keeping in touch with that vision and having forward thinking and the long view.
Merritt would say, holding your vision. And so I think I love that it goes from your thoughts that you couldn't dream big, and here you are, dreaming big, holding your vision, and that's your mantra. I love it. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
It's been wonderful.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Michael Esposito Show. For show notes, video clips, and more episodes, go to michaelespositoinc.com/podcast. Thank you again to our sponsor, Den10 Insurance Services, helping businesses get the right insurance for all their insurance needs. Visit den10.io to get a quote. That's DENTEN.io. And remember, when you buy an insurance policy from Den10, you're giving back on a global scale. This episode was produced by Uncle Mike at the iHeart Studios in Poughkeepsie. Special thanks to Lara Rodrian for the opportunity and my team at Michael Esposito Inc.